Welcome all to the Gaming Codex, the show where we try to delve into the meaning of misused, disused, and overused terms that refer to games, the gaming media, and the gaming industry. And today's word is old school, in the sense that the word is brackets old school, or quotation marks, so that's the word. So what is where there's no dictionary definition for old school when it comes to games, but there is a sort of general-ish definition. And that would be a game having the sensibilities of games from earlier ages, namely the 80s and early 90s, when the majority of current gaming genres were defined. Though you could probably throw in there some 70s as well if you're into shitty games on Atari, which was most of them. I know, because I played them for years. They are not what I would like to remember as being old school about games, so old school generally refers to the positive aspects, the positive sensibilities of those earlier games. For example, maybe something that is very challenging, because old games used to come in arcade form and those things were hard as hell because they needed to eat up all your money. But it can also refer to different things, like old school dungeon crawling, referring to a specific subset of the RPG where you traverse through a dungeon in a very specific fashion, a kind of dungeon that is very diverse, highly explorable, and filled with all sorts of secrets, and sometimes you have to draw your own map. That's not usually required, but it can be a thing. That is, in a nutshell, what old school may mean to most people that know what old school means. Now, what is the popular definition of old school? Well, that would be something that looks old or is obtuse as hell. Because let's face it, old games, some of them, did not look all that good, all that grammar, did not have the greatest graphics possible because there were certain limitations back in the day. And those limitations also imposed other things upon the game, like you couldn't have a tutorial, you couldn't have tooltips, you couldn't have an interface that was intuitive because you basically just had keyboard commands and maybe hope that the player had the manual. So games were very obtuse. Trying to understand something in them logically usually proved to be kind of a fruitless quest, and you were left with randomly trying to figure out things. And sadly, that seems to be sort of what remained from the meaning of old school in a lot of modern games. Being obtuse now seems to be equated to not hand-holding the player, which is rubbish. Actually telling the player what's going on, giving him information, isn't hand-holding. Not letting the player fail, making everything easy peasy. That is holding the player's hand. Explaining to the player what the statistics of the character do, what they influence and by how much, and where the hell they're supposed to go, that's not holding the player's hands, that's just not being an obtuse son of a bitch, like some games currently call old school currently are. And lastly, what would be the marketing definition of old school? Well, that is something we use to describe a video game in order to get it to appeal to the current games they create audience. That's it. People have called Duke Nukem Forever old school. Not just Gearbox, but not journalists, people in the gaming media have called it old school with a straight face. A game where you only have two guns regenerating health and levels that are about as non-linear as a piece of string tied between two rhinoceroses running in opposite directions. That was old school. Somehow. And then people go, well, you see, the game didn't do so well because old school sensibility. Oh, shut up. You want old school? Go play Legends of Grimrock. Especially 2. It's sort of fixes some of the rougher edges the first one had. You want old school? Go play Lords of Xulima, which also has a bit sort of an obtusity issue with the I don't know what abilities my characters will get, so there's no planning involved. But you want old school? Go and play anything developed by Spiderweb Software. You want old school? Go and play something like Divinity Original Sin that still has the sensibilities of an old school game where difficulty is still a thing, where you interacting with the environment is still a thing, where a challenge and tactical combat are still things. Go play Hard Reset if you want an old school FPS-ish. Go play 8-bit armies if you want an old school RTS. But if anybody ever again says that Duke Nukem Forever is old school, I swear on the grave of the almighty eternal dragon, I will find you on the internet and I will tell you to your face in the comments that you are wrong. And so closes this chapter in the Gaming Codex. Come back next time when we will talk about something different and maybe a bit more casual. Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process. Or you could consider buying my book called Tale of Doom. Volume 1 is out now and available for just $2. And as always, if you thought it was horrible, you know where to find me and complain about it.